This is about the drama of the moment and trying to be able to prove that you oppose Trump. Okay, we get it. You don't like President Trump. But what I don't get is, why are the folks that work for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, why are the folks that work at TSA, why are the Coast Guard members, why are the folks that handle weapons of mass destruction, why are the folks that handle cybersecurity for our nation, why are we not paying them while we're having this political fight? This may be good political drama, but for the 250,000 federal employees that are getting up and going to work without a paycheck this week, it's not drama to them.
Is the government shutdown really about funding, or is it about immigration enforcement? That question exploded on the Senate floor when Senator James Lankford accused Democrats of targeting ICE, even if it means leaving hundreds of thousands of federal workers without pay. In this video, you'll see why Senator James Lankford blasted Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer over the shutdown. You'll hear how the fight over immigration enforcement is affecting TSA agents, FEMA responders, and Coast Guard members. And you'll understand why this debate could reshape how Washington handles government shutdowns in the future. Because according to Lankford, the people suffering most aren't politicians. They're the federal workers keeping the country running.
We are in yet another partial government shutdown. We're in it right now. What's interesting is we just had our last vote of the week, and this is still not resolved, and members are all heading back home as if everything's normal, but it's not. Next week, we'll have people that work for the Department of Homeland Security not get a paycheck because it's not funded, because this body has not resolved this. Now, I understand my Democratic colleagues want to defund ICE. I get that. I hear from them over and over again. Let's defund ICE. And their way of defunding ICE is to be able to cut off funding to this particular part of our federal budget. But I think some of my colleagues have lost track of what this means to be able to cut off DHS funding. It's not just cutting off ICE. In fact, ICE is a very small portion of the Department of Homeland Security. There are about 250,000 total employees across all entities in the Department of Homeland Security. ICE has 21,000 of that 250,000 plus. It is a very small group, but they're determined they're going to defund ICE. But what they're actually defunding is not just ICE. They've also defunded U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They've defunded the United States Coast Guard. They've defunded Customs and Border Protection. Those are all the folks that actually handle customs duties and produce coming across our border. They've defunded the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They've defunded FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They defunded the federal law enforcement training centers. They've defunded United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's ICE, what they were targeting. They've also defunded Secret Service, TSA, those folks that a lot of members are going to go check in with to get on a flight right now. They're not getting a paycheck next week, though they're still working this week. They've defunded the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. Listen, this is a big deal. We just had a shutdown of 43 days, the longest in American history. Those TSA agents lost 2 paychecks during that time period. There are a lot of Americans can't miss one and make it. They missed 2. The TSA agent I walked past a couple of weeks ago caught me as I came through and said, "I feel like my paycheck is bipolar. I never know whether it's going to be there or not." And all I could say to them was, "I'm so sorry, we're trying to get this open." But my Democratic colleagues are so mad at ICE and so determined that they don't want enforcement across the country that TSA agents in my state are not getting a paycheck. What in the world do the TSA agents in my state have to do with the rage against ICE? What in the world do the Coast Guard folks have to do with the rage against ICE? What in the world do the FEMA folks that are handling emergencies in preparation for spring storms and dealing with wildfires across the country, what do they have to do with their rage against ICE? If we want to have an argument about ICE, let's have it. But why are we cutting off the paycheck of folks that work for FEMA because somebody's mad at ICE? That makes no sense to me. And it certainly doesn't make sense to those folks at the airport in my state who work every single day, that show up way earlier than most Americans actually wake up and get up. They're already at their spot early that morning, taking care of passengers, making sure everybody's safe. They have nothing to do with ICE, except now they're not getting a paycheck because somebody's mad at them. Listen, we should be able to resolve our differences in this body and not have other people not get a paycheck because of that. I have worked literally for years across the aisle and in conversation in this body to be able to come up with a very simple, straightforward bill that says when we get to a moment that we haven't resolved everything in funding, when we get to that moment, instead of having a government shutdown, everyone would still be paid. We'd go to what's called a continuing resolution automatically. Everyone would still get paid. The status quo would continue, except one thing. We would not leave. We would be here. The House and the Senate, 7 days a week. We would have to be in session and keep working until we solve the problem. Put the pressure on us. Rather than cutting off the paycheck of somebody who has no ability to be able to make the decision to solve this, why don't you put the pressure on us where it should be to be able to stay here until it's resolved? My Democratic colleagues have demanded that we have body-worn cameras on ICE agents. We as Republicans have said, we agree. In fact, the bill that you're blocking literally has $20 million in a requirement to have body-worn cameras for law enforcement in the bill that you're blocking. We agree. Body-worn cameras are helpful for law enforcement and for the public to tell the complete story of what actually happened. My Democratic colleagues have demanded that we get de-escalation training for federal officers. We as Republicans have said, yeah, we agree with that as well. In fact, the bill that you're blocking, that you refuse to even take up, actually includes money for de-escalation training on it. And there's not some trick on it. It's the actual issue that everyone seems to be addressing right now. This is about the drama of the moment and trying to be able to prove that you oppose Trump. Okay, we get it. You don't like President Trump. But what I don't get is, why are the folks that work for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, why are the folks that work at TSA, why are the Coast Guard members, why are the folks that handle weapons of mass destruction, why are the folks that handle cybersecurity for our nation, why are we not paying them while we're having this political fight? This may be good political drama, but for the 250,000 federal employees that are getting up and going to work without a paycheck this week, it's not drama to them. It's a problem that we need to solve.
A dramatic moment unfolded on the floor of the United States Senate as Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma delivered a sharp rebuke aimed directly at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Lankford argued the ongoing government shutdown has become a political weapon. According to him, Democrats are so focused on restricting immigration enforcement that they are willing to block funding for the entire Department of Homeland Security. And in the process, he warned, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are paying the price. Lankford began by laying out the reality of what a shutdown actually means. More than 250,000 employees across the Department of Homeland Security depend on congressional funding. But when that funding stops, many of those workers are still required to show up for work, without pay. That includes people responsible for protecting airports, responding to disasters, and securing America's borders. According to Lankford, the political debate in Washington has become disconnected from the reality these workers face every day. Lankford also pushed back against the narrative that the shutdown fight is only about immigration and customs enforcement. He argued that blocking funding for ICE doesn't just affect one agency, it affects the entire Department of Homeland Security. That includes the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Transportation Security Administration, the United States Coast Guard, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. According to Lankford, targeting ICE ultimately harms thousands of federal workers who have nothing to do with immigration enforcement. One of the most emotional parts of Lankford's speech focused on the people behind those jobs. He described conversations with TSA agents who report to airports before sunrise every day. Their job is to keep travelers safe. But during a shutdown, those same workers may not know when their next paycheck is coming. Some struggle to pay rent. Others worry about buying groceries or covering basic expenses for their families. Lankford argued that no federal employee should be forced into that situation because of political gridlock. Lankford also used the moment to highlight a proposal he has supported for years. The idea is simple. If Congress fails to pass a budget on time, an automatic continuing resolution would take effect. That would keep the government funded and ensure federal employees continue receiving their paychecks. Meanwhile, members of Congress would be required to remain in Washington until a final agreement is reached. Langford said the pressure should be on lawmakers, not on federal workers. If you want more breakdowns of explosive moments on Capitol Hill and the biggest political battles shaping the country, make sure to subscribe and stay informed. Langford ended his speech with a direct accusation. He argued that Republicans had already agreed to several Democratic demands. Those included funding for body cameras for federal agents and de-escalation training programs. Yet the funding bill was still blocked. According to Langford, the real issue isn't policy. It's politics. He argued that opposition to President Donald Trump, not policy disagreements,